The ancient corridors of Zaharian Command Station hummed with the familiar sounds of military precision. Commander Vexel strode through the metallic halls, his posture as rigid as the Empire's doctrine he had served for 3 centuries. The flickering holomaps cast an eerie blue glow across his scaled features as he approached the command center. The Outer Rim had been quiet for decades, too quiet for Vexel's liking. "Status report," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of military tradition. Lieutenant Zellman straightened at his console. "All sectors reporting normal activity. Commander, patrol squadrons maintaining designated routes along the frontier." Vexel nodded, satisfied yet restless. The Zaharian Empire had stood for millennia, its military might unchallenged across 12 star systems. The frontier of the Outer Rim represented not just a physical boundary, but an ideological one. Beyond lay the unknown, the chaotic, the uncivilized. "And the human settlements?" Vexel asked, almost as an afterthought. Zellman's expression shifted slightly. "Scattered and primitive as always. Sir, their colonies remain isolated in the sparsely charted systems beyond Kepler 442. Vexel made a dismissive gesture. Humans were barely worth monitoring, refugees from a dying planet who had managed to establish a handful of struggling colonies across distant star systems. They lacked the centralized authority and military doctrine that had made the Zaharian Empire great. Their ships were cobbled-together freighters and mining vessels, not the sleek warships that comprised the Imperial fleet. "Very good," Vexel said, turning his attention to more important matters. "Prepare the daily transmission to High Command. I want to review the—" An urgent beeping interrupted him. Zellman's fingers flew across his console, his eyes widening. "Commander," he said, his voice tight. "Sensors are detecting multiple unknown vessels approaching Sector 7. Vexel moved quickly to the main display. "How many?" Initial count. 73. "No. 112. "Sir, the numbers keep increasing. Current count stands at over 200 vessels on direct course to Zaharian space." The command center fell silent. Vexel stared at the display, watching as the red dots multiplied across the screen. "That can't be right," he muttered. "Run a diagnostic." "Diagnostic already complete. Sir, these readings are accurate." Vexel's mind raced through possibilities. "Pirates?" "Negative, sir. No known pirate flotilla has ever assembled a force this large." "Refugees from the Andromeda conflict?" "Movement pattern is too organized for refugee traffic." "Sir, they're maintaining formation and synchronized velocity." A cold feeling settled in Vexel's gut, one he hadn't experienced in centuries of service. "Open a secure channel to High Command," he ordered. "Priority Alpha." As the communication officer scrambled to establish the connection, Vexel continued to watch the display. The vessels, whatever they were, continued their steady approach toward Zaharian space. "Who are you?" he whispered to the screen. Aboard the civilian-converted UES Liberty, Captain Jake Murphy stood on the humble bridge that had once belonged to a mid-range cargo freighter. The retrofit wasn't pretty. Exposed conduits ran along the ceiling, and the command chairs were salvaged from a decommissioned passenger liner, but it was functional. And right now, that was all that mattered. "Engineering reports all systems nominal. Captain," Lisa Bennett announced from her station. The former mining engineer had transformed the Liberty's cargo haulers into something approaching military-grade propulsion systems. Fusion reactors stable at 97%. Murphy nodded, glancing at the main view screen where the vast emptiness of space was punctuated by the lights of other vessels, cargo haulers, mining platforms, and even cruise liners, all repurposed for this journey. For war, if necessary. Communications? He asked, turning to Amy Rodriguez. All ships maintaining communication protocols. Quantum network stable, she replied, her fingers dancing across her console. Fleet coordination reporting 237 vessels, warp-ready, and in formation. Murphy allowed himself a moment of pride. 237 ships where Earth's official navy had once numbered fewer than 30. When the environmental collapse had accelerated beyond the point of no return, humanity had rallied in a way no one had thought possible. Every ship capable of interstellar travel had been retrofitted. Every available resource redirected to the Exodus. Navigation, Murphy called. Time to Zaharian border? Approximately 6 hours at current velocity. Captain, came the response. Murphy took a deep breath. 6 hours until they reached the territory of an empire they knew little about, except that it was vast, ancient, and fiercely territorial. Intelligence suggested the Zaharians had the technology and military might to obliterate humanity's makeshift fleet, if they chose to. Captain, Rodriguez called, her voice tight with tension. I'm picking up increased communication traffic from Zaharian space. They've detected us. Murphy nodded slowly. As expected. Are they broadcasting any warnings? Threats? No direct communication, but... Rodriguez paused, listening intently to her earpiece. There's a lot of chatter. They seem... confused, sir. Murphy allowed himself a thin smile. Good. Confusion works in our favor. He turned to the rest of the bridge crew. Send word to all ships. Operation Exodus proceeds as planned. Maintain formation and prepare contingencies. As the bridge crew acknowledged his orders, Murphy gazed at the view screen, at the stars that represented humanity's last hope. Earth was dying, had been dying for generations, but the acceleration of the collapse had caught even the most pessimistic scientists by surprise. There had been no time for careful planning, for building a proper evacuation fleet. They had used what they had, and now, 237 vessels carrying the remains of human civilization were approaching the border of an empire that might destroy them on sight. We're coming, ready or not, Murphy whispered to the distant stars. Ooh! Commander Vexel stood before the holographic council, the blue light of the projection giving his scaled skin an otherworldly glow. The 7 members of the Zaharian High Command stared back at him, their expressions ranging from concern to outright skepticism. 200 vessels, Commander Zeke repeated, his voice dripping with scorn. And you believe these are human? Vexel maintained his composure. Intelligence indicates the ships match known human design profiles, albeit heavily modified. Their movement patterns and energy signatures suggest coordinated action under unified command. Admiral Chryson, the eldest and most respected member of High Command, leaned forward. Humans have never demonstrated such military capability. Their colonies are scattered, their technology primitive compared to ours. With respect, Admiral, Vexel replied. Our intelligence on human capabilities may be outdated. We have not conducted a thorough assessment of their territories in over 50 standard years. Because they weren't worth assessing, Zeke interjected, a species barely capable of warp travel, clinging to survival on a handful of resource-poor worlds. Vexel hesitated, then spoke carefully. The data suggests otherwise, Commander. Whatever this fleet represents, it is not the work of a primitive species. A murmur ran through the council. Admiral Chryson raised a hand for silence. What is your assessment of their intentions, Commander Vexel? Unknown, Admiral. They maintain a direct course for our border, but have made no aggressive movements. No communications have been attempted. A show of force, perhaps, offered another council member, or a prelude to invasion. 200 ships would not be sufficient to invade the Empire, Zeke scoffed. Unless, Vexel said quietly, these are merely the vanguard of a larger force. The statement hung in the air, heavy with implication. The Zaharian Empire had stood unchallenged for so long that the very concept of a genuine threat seemed almost absurd. Yet the data could not be ignored. Admiral Chryson's expression hardened. Deploy the 3rd and 5th fleets to intercept. Activate the defense grid along the outer rim. If these humans seek to test our resolve, they will learn why the Zaharian Empire has endured for 10,000 years. The council members nodded in agreement, all except one, an older general who had remained silent throughout the discussion. General Thex, Chryson acknowledged, you have concerns? The general's ancient face was a map of wrinkles and battle scars. I fought in the Andromeda campaign, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I have seen what desperate species are capable of when pushed to extinction. If these humans come in peace, we risk creating an enemy where none existed. If they come for war, he paused. 200 ships do not constitute a military threat to the Empire, but 200 ships of unknown capability, under unknown command, with unknown technology. That constitutes an unknown risk, and in my experience, unknown risks have a way of becoming catastrophic very quickly. A heavy silence fell over the council. Admiral Kryken considered the general's words, then turned back to Vexel. Your orders stand, Commander. Intercept and assess, but do not engage unless provoked. We will not start a war today, but neither will we show weakness. Vexel bowed slightly. As you command, Admiral. As the holographic projections faded, Vexel found himself alone in the communication chamber, the weight of his orders pressing down on him. 2 fleets against 200 ships, overwhelming force by any standard. Yet, as he recalled General Thex's words, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something fundamental about their mysterious adversary. Lisa Bennett hunched over the retrofitted engineering console aboard the Liberty, her fingers dancing across the controls as she fine-tuned the massive mining lasers that had been repurposed as weapons. The cargo bay below her station had been transformed into a makeshift armory, with rock crushers mounted on makeshift gimbals to serve as battering rams and fusion engines, powering improvised artillery. How's it coming? Bennett? Murphy asked, approaching her station. She straightened, wiping sweat from her brow. The mining lasers are at 93% efficiency. Captain, they won't cut through military-grade shields, but they'll make a dent. The rock crushers are another story. They're designed to pulverize asteroids, not warships. But they'll work? Bennett grinned. Oh, they'll work. Just not pretty or elegant. Point them at something, and that something gets crushed. Just don't expect precision. Murphy nodded. Satisfied. Humanity's fleet wasn't built for elegance or precision. It was built from necessity, from desperation, from the collective ingenuity of a species fighting for survival. Captain, Rodriguez called from communications. You'll want to hear this. Murphy moved to her station, where she handed him a headset. Through the static, he could make out voices, alien voices, speaking in the harsh consonants of the Zaharian language. Translation? He asked. Rodriguez tapped a few commands, and the alien speech was replaced by a computerized English translation. Unknown power. Could be Andromeda remnants, or even Vexelan insurgents using human ship designs as cover. Deploy the 3rd and 5th fleets. Full combat readiness. Cannot be human. Their technological capability does not match known intelligence. Murphy removed the headset, a grim smile forming on his lips. They don't think it's us, he said, almost to himself. They think we're some unknown power using human ships as a disguise. That works in our favor, Rodriguez pointed out, The more confused they are, the better our chances. Murphy turned to the tactical station. Time to implement Operation Phantom. Deploy the cargo drones. Across the fleet, cargo doors opened, releasing thousands of small drones. Each drone was little more than a cargo crate, equipped with a simple propulsion system and energy emitters designed to mimic the signature of a much larger vessel. From a distance, sensors would detect not 200 ships, but nearly 1,000, a phantom fleet materializing from nowhere. Drones deployed. Captain, the tactical officer reported, energy signatures stabilizing. From the Zaharian perspective, we just tripled in size. Let's see how they react to that, Murphy said, returning to his command chair. All ships maintain formation. Prepare for possible engagement at Kepler 442. As the orders were relayed throughout the fleet, Murphy studied the star chart displayed on his personal console. Kepler 442 marked the formal boundary of Zaharian space and the point of no return for humanity's desperate gamble. The Zaharian patrol squadron moved through the darkness of space with practiced precision. 6 cruisers, arranged in perfect formation, their sleek hulls gleaming in the light of distant stars. Commander Zeke stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, his posture rigid with pride and anticipation. Any sign of the human fleet? He asked, barely concealing his eagerness for combat. Negative, Commander, his sensor officer replied. All sectors clear. Zeke frowned. The human fleet should have reached this sector by now, according to Vexel's intelligence. Had they changed course? Retreated? The thought that they might have outmaneuvered him was unacceptable. Expand sensor range, he ordered. They must be. Sir, the officer interrupted, his voice rising with alarm. Multiple contacts appearing from all directions. Zeke whirled to face the main display. Where moments before there had been empty space, now hundreds of red dots swarmed like insects. Impossible, he breathed. Where did they come from? Unknown, sir. They weren't there a moment ago. Raise shields. Battle stations, Zeke commanded, his training taking over despite his shock. Before the crew could fully comply, the first wave hit them. They weren't ships, at least not proper warships. They were drones, hundreds of them, swarming around the Zaharian cruisers like angry insects. Most were too small to cause damage, but they overwhelmed the targeting systems, making it impossible to get a clean lock on any single threat. What is this? Zeke demanded as his ship shuddered from multiple small impacts. And then the real attack began. From the chaos emerged larger objects, mining drones. Their rock-crushing apparatus transformed into battering rams. They slammed into the Zaharian cruisers with devastating force, not trying to penetrate the shields, but simply hammering them with brute kinetic energy. Shields failing on cruisers 3 and 5, the tactical officer reported. Where are their capital ships? Zeke demanded, gripping the command rail as his own vessel shuddered under another impact. As if in answer, a new wave of contacts appeared on the sensors, larger vessels emerging from the cover of a nearby asteroid field. But these weren't military vessels. They were civilian ships repurposed for war. Cargo haulers bristling with mining lasers, passenger liners with makeshift missile tubes, a cruise ship whose observation deck now housed a massive particle cannon. Target the largest vessels, Zeke ordered, fighting to maintain control of the situation. The Zaharian cruisers fired, their advanced weapon systems seeking out the human capital ships. But the swarm of drones intercepted many of the shots, sacrificing themselves to protect the larger vessels. And the human ships moved with unexpected agility, using the asteroid field for cover and coordination. Then came the final shock. The mining drones that had been disabled by Zaharian fire suddenly accelerated toward the cruisers in suicide runs. Each drone detonated on impact, its power core overloading in a blinding flash. Cruisers 3 and 5 have lost all shields, the tactical officer reported, his voice strained. Cruiser 2 reporting critical damage to propulsion systems. Zeke stared at the tactical display in disbelief. In less than 10 minutes, his squadron of advanced military vessels was being systematically disabled by retrofitted civilian ships and mining equipment. "Send emergency transmission to command," he ordered, his pride giving way to the reality of their situation. "We are under attack by forces of unknown capability and require immediate reinforcement." As his communications officer scrambled to comply, Zeke continued to watch the battle unfold. The humans weren't fighting like a military force. They were fighting like survivors, like a species with nothing to lose. And somehow, that made them more dangerous than any conventional enemy he had trained to face. Vexel stood in the command center of Zaharian Station, watching as reports flooded in from the frontier. Commander Zeke's patrol squadron had been neutralized, not destroyed, but disabled, left adrift in space with minimal life support and no propulsion. It was a tactic that made no strategic sense to Vexel. In war, you destroyed your enemy's military assets. You didn't leave them crippled, but intact. "They're advancing toward the Meridian defense grid," Zellman reported, updating the holographic display. Vexel studied the projection. The human fleet, if it was indeed human, had grown even larger since their last intelligence assessment. Nearly 1,000 vessels now, of various sizes and configurations, moving in patterns that defied conventional military doctrine. "What do they want?" he murmured, more to himself than to his officers. Admiral Crichton's hologram flickered into existence beside him. "Commander Vexel, I've reviewed your reports. This situation has been elevated to a Level 1 security concern." Vexel bowed slightly to his superior. "Admiral, request permission to engage with the full force of the Third Fleet." Christen's expression remained impassive. "Permission granted. But Vexel..." He hesitated. Something unusual for the typically decisive admiral. "These tactics they're employing, they're unlike anything in our military archives." "I've noted that, Admiral." "Be cautious. We're deploying the 7th Fleet from the core worlds as reinforcement, but they won't arrive for another 26 hours. Vexel absorbed this information with growing concern. If High Command was deploying a core world fleet, they were taking this threat very seriously indeed. "Understood, Admiral. We will hold the Meridian grid until reinforcements arrive." As Chryson's hologram faded, Vexel turned back to the tactical display. For the first time in his 3 centuries of service, he felt a sensation that took him a moment to identify. Doubt. Not doubt in the Empire's ultimate victory, that was unthinkable, but doubt in his understanding of the enemy they faced. He had spent his career studying military doctrine, strategy, the art of war as practiced by civilized species across the known galaxy. But this human fleet, they weren't following any recognized doctrine. They were making it up as they went along, adapting, improvising, and somehow, it was working. Aboard the Liberty, Murphy stood at the center of the bridge, studying the holographic representation of the Meridian defense grid. The massive network of automated defense platforms and manned stations formed the backbone of the Zaharian Empire's border security, and now stood as the primary obstacle between humanity and its future. "All ships report ready. Captain," Rodriguez announced, "Operation Breakthrough is prepared to commence on your order." Murphy nodded, his expression grave. The coming battle would determine whether humanity found a new home or perished in the cold vacuum of space. Earth was no longer an option. The accelerating environmental collapse had rendered the planet uninhabitable for large-scale human population. The colony worlds within known space lacked the resources to support more than a fraction of the survivors, They needed the fertile worlds within Zaharian space, worlds the Empire had claimed but barely utilized, according to their intelligence. This isn't going to be like Kepler 442, Murphy warned his bridge crew. The defense grid is automated, heavily armed, and designed specifically to repel large-scale attacks. And according to intelligence, the Third Fleet is already in position to support it. So what's the plan, Captain? Bennett asked from engineering. Our modifications are holding for now, but we can't match their firepower in a direct confrontation. Murphy's lips curved in a grim smile. We're not going to match it. We're going to overwhelm it. Deploy all platform units to designated coordinates. Activate Operation Honeycomb. The order was relayed throughout the fleet. Dozens of converted mining platforms, massive, ungainly structures never designed for combat, moved into formation. Each platform was essentially a floating city, housing thousands of refugees and equipment that had been hastily repurposed for this desperate mission. Platforms in position, Tactical reported. Begin approach, Murphy ordered. All ships maintain designated lanes, drone swarms to forward positions. The human fleet accelerated toward the Meridian grid, their formation shifting from a traditional battle line to something that resembled a flock of migrating birds, fluid, adaptable, with smaller vessels darting forward to draw fire, while larger ships maintained a protective formation around the platforms. Zaharian defense grid is activating, Rodriguez reported. Energy buildup detected across all stations. As expected, Murphy replied calmly. Deploy countermeasures. Across the fleet, cargo bays opened, releasing clouds of metallic chaff, a primitive but effective method of confusing enemy targeting systems. Simultaneously, the drone swarms accelerated ahead, their energy signatures calibrated to mimic larger vessels and draw the first wave of fire. The defense grid opened fire, massive energy beams lancing through space, destroying dozens of drones in seconds. But for every drone destroyed, 3 more took its place, overwhelming the grid's targeting systems with too many potential threats. Platforms approaching optimal range, Tactical announced. Murphy took a deep breath. This was the moment of greatest risk and greatest potential reward. Execute ramming maneuver, he ordered. All platforms, full thrust. The massive mining platforms surged forward, their reinforced hulls aimed directly at the defense stations. It was a tactic no military commander would ever consider, sacrificing your largest vessels in a suicide run against fixed defenses. But the platforms weren't military vessels, and they weren't being sacrificed. Impact in 5, 4, 3. Tactical counted down. The first platform slammed into a defense station with catastrophic force. The station's shields flared and failed under the kinetic impact, and then the platform's structure began to break apart, exactly as planned. Deployment successful, Rodriguez reported. Escape pods launching. What the Zaharians couldn't know, what Murphy was counting on them not realizing in time, was that the platforms were designed to break apart on impact. Each section was a self-contained survival pod, carrying refugees, supplies, and equipment. As the platforms disintegrated against the defense stations, hundreds of these pods were flung in all directions, passing through the gaps in the grid created by the very collisions that launched them. Second wave of platforms approaching impact. Tactical reported. Murphy watched the tactical display, his heart pounding. They were committed now. There was no turning back, no retreat. If the Zaharians realized what they were doing and adjusted their defenses— "Sir, we're detecting Zaharian warships moving to intercept the pods." Murphy's jaw tightened. Deploy all remaining drones to protect the pods. Signal the Liberty Squadron to move to attack position. The Liberty led a group of 30 converted freighters toward the approaching Zaharian warships. Each freighter had been stripped down for speed and armed with a single, powerful weapon, a modified mining laser, a missile battery, a makeshift railgun. They weren't meant to win a prolonged engagement. They were meant to buy time. "All ships, engage at will," Murphy ordered. "Protect those pods at all costs." The bridge crew acknowledged the order, their faces tense but determined. They all understood what was at stake, not just their own lives, but the future of their species. As the Liberty accelerated toward the lead Zaharian warship, Murphy gripped the arms of his command chair. Whatever happened in the next few hours would determine whether humanity found a new home or joined the long list of species that had vanished into the darkness of extinction. Admiral Chryson stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Indomitable, watching in stunned silence as the battle for the Meridian Grid unfolded before him. He had arrived with the 7th Fleet expecting to find the situation contained, perhaps challenging, but ultimately under control. Instead, he had found chaos. "What enemy fights with cargo loaders and tractors?" he muttered, watching as yet another mining platform broke apart against a defense station, scattering smaller objects in all directions. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting life signs in those debris clusters." Christen's eyes narrowed. "Life signs in the debris?" "Yes, Admiral. They appear to be escape pods. Thousands of them." "Sir." Christen moved closer to the tactical display, studying the readings with growing disbelief. The mining platforms weren't weapons. They were transport vessels, designed to break apart on impact and scatter their contents past the defense grid. "They're not attacking," he realized aloud. "They're migrating." A new alert sounded, drawing his attention to another section of the display. The human vessels were engaging Zaharian warships now, but their tactics continued to defy conventional military logic. They darted in and out of range, never standing and fighting, using their smaller size and greater numbers to confuse and disorient rather than destroy. And they were building ships, actually constructing new vessels in the midst of battle. Christen watched, fascinated despite himself, as several large vessels hung back from the fighting, using automated systems to harvest material from nearby asteroids and convert it into crude but functional drones and weapons platforms. "Sir," his communications officer called, "we're intercepting transmissions between the human vessels. They're using some form of quantum communication, instantaneous across vast distances." "Let me hear it," Chryson ordered. The bridge speakers came alive with a cacophony of human voices, speaking rapidly in their harsh, guttural language. The translation software struggled to keep up, but Chryson caught fragments that chilled him to his core. Last reserves of atmosphere. Children's section secure. Proceeding to. Agricultural modules sustaining damage. Reroute. Can't go back. There's nowhere to go back to. These weren't military communications. They were the desperate coordination of refugees, of civilians fighting for survival. Christen turned to his second-in-command, the recently promoted Vexel. "What do we know about Earth? About the human homeworld?" Vexel looked startled by the question. "Little recent intelligence, Admiral. Our last comprehensive survey was nearly 50 standard years ago. At that time, they were experiencing severe environmental degradation due to industrial practices, but nothing that threatened planetary habitability." 50 years, Chryson repeated softly. "Much can change in 50 years. He turned back to the tactical display, seeing the battle with new eyes. Not an invasion force, but a refugee convoy. Not an enemy armada, but the desperate last gasp of a dying species. "Order all ships to cease fire," he commanded, his voice cutting through the tension on the bridge. Vexel stepped forward. "Admiral?" "Cease fire," Chryson repeated firmly. "And prepare a communication channel. I wish to speak with whoever commands this fleet." As his orders were relayed throughout the Zaharian forces, Kraken continued to watch the human vessels. They weren't retreating despite the lull in Zaharian attacks. Instead, they were regrouping, forming a protective perimeter around the thousands of escape pods that had breached the defense grid, protecting their most vulnerable, just as any civilization would. "Admiral," the communications officer called. "We've established a channel to what appears to be their command ship." Creekson straightened his posture, conscious of the historical significance of this moment. On screen, the main view screen flickered, and then displayed the bridge of a vessel that looked nothing like a warship. Exposed conduits ran along the ceiling, and the command chairs appeared to be salvaged from civilian craft. And at the center stood a human male, his face etched with exhaustion, but his eyes alert and defiant. "I am Admiral Kryson of the Zaharian Empire," Kryson began, adopting the formal tones of diplomatic contact. "To whom am I speaking?" The human regarded him steadily. "Captain Jake Murphy of the United Earthship Liberty, commander of the Exodus Fleet." Exodus. The word confirmed Kryken's suspicions. "Captain Murphy, your fleet has violated Zaharian sovereign territory and engaged in hostile actions against Imperial forces. Yet I find myself curious about your intentions." Murphy's expression didn't change. "My intentions are simple. Admiral, to find a home for what remains of humanity before we cease to exist as a species." The bluntness of the statement caught Creekson off guard. "Explain." "Earth is dying," Murphy said, his voice flat. "Has been for generations, but the collapse accelerated beyond our ability to adapt. The atmosphere became toxic in most regions 3 years ago. The last habitable zones will fail within months. Our colony worlds lack the resources to support more than a fraction of our survivors." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "We need new worlds. Admiral. Habitable worlds, with the resources to support human life. Your empire controls dozens of such worlds on your frontier, worlds you've claimed but barely utilized." "So you come as conquerors?" Kryson challenged. Murphy shook his head. "We come as refugees. We don't want to fight you, Admiral. We want to live beside you. But we will fight if we must, because the alternative is extinction." Kryson considered the human's words, weighing them against the evidence of his own eyes. The makeshift fleet, the civilian vessels converted to war, the desperate tactics that no trained military would ever employ. "I propose a meeting, Captain Murphy," he said finally. "A parley, to discuss terms. Sanctuary Prime orbit, in 6 hours. You may bring 2 vessels as escort." Murphy hesitated, clearly weighing the risk of a trap against the opportunity for peaceful resolution. "Agreed," he said at last. "Liberty will rendezvous with you at Sanctuary Prime in 6 hours, with 2 escorts." As the communication ended, Vexel approached Kryson's side. "Admiral, is this wise? We could still neutralize their fleet with the combined might of the 3rd and 7th. "At what cost, Commander?" Kryson asked quietly. "How many of our own would we lose in the process? And to what end? The extermination of a species already on the brink of extinction?" He shook his head. "The Empire has stood for 10,000 years, not merely through military might, but through wisdom. Sometimes, that wisdom means recognizing when not to fight." Vexel didn't appear convinced, but he bowed slightly in acknowledgement of the order. "As you command, Admiral." As the Indomitable changed course for Sanctuary Prime, Kryson returned his gaze to the tactical display, where the human vessels continued their protective formation around the refugee pods. Somewhere in those fragile containers were the remnants of a civilization, their art, their knowledge, their children, their future. An interesting species, "These humans," he murmured. "Let us see what becomes of them." The Liberty maintained a steady course towards Sanctuary Prime, flanked by two of the fleet's more impressive vessels, a converted luxury liner whose sleek profile belied the weapon systems now hidden beneath its hull, and a massive mining platform whose bulk served as both protection and statement of intent. They weren't coming as supplicants, but as equals seeking terms. On the bridge, Murphy stood before a makeshift briefing area, addressing the small team that would accompany him to the parley. "We don't know what to expect," he cautioned them. "This could be a genuine diplomatic opening, or it could be a delaying tactic while they bring in reinforcements. Either way, it's an opportunity we can't afford to waste." Colonel Diana Hayes, the fleet's chief security officer, checked her sidearm for the third time. "With respect, Captain, I still think this is a trap. The Zaharians have no reason to negotiate when they hold all the military advantages. Except that they don't know what we're capable of," Murphy pointed out. "Our tactics have confused them. They can't categorize us according to their military doctrine, and that makes us unpredictable. Unpredictable enemies are dangerous enemies." Dr. Grace Turner, the fleet's agricultural specialist, spoke up. "The scans of Sanctuary Prime confirm it's suitable for human settlement. Atmosphere, gravity, soil composition, all within acceptable parameters. If we can secure access to even a portion of the planet, we could establish a sustainable colony within a year." Murphy nodded, grateful for the reminder of what was at stake. "That's our primary objective: secure settlement rights on viable worlds. We're not looking to join their empire or challenge their authority. We just need space to live." "And if they refuse?" Hayes pressed. Murphy's expression hardened. "Then we continue as planned. Operation Dispersal is already underway. The pods that breach the defense grid are establishing beachheads on 3 border worlds. If diplomacy fails, we fight a war of settlement, not conquest." The announcement of their approach to the rendezvous point ended the briefing. Murphy moved to the command chair, straightening his uniform, a simple blue jumpsuit with a United Earth insignia, the only concession to formality in a fleet where function had long since overtaken form. "Zaharian vessels detected," Rodriguez reported from communications. "One capital ship identified as the Indomitable, Admiral Kryken's flagship. 2 escort cruisers maintaining flanking positions." "Match their formation," Murphy ordered. "Standard defensive protocols, but no aggressive posture. We want to appear confident, but not threatening." As the Liberty and its escorts approached the rendezvous point, the massive form of the Indomitable grew on the view screen. The Zaharian flagship was a testament to the Empire's technological superiority. Sleek, elegant, and radiating power. Beside it, the Liberty looked like what it was: a converted freighter pressed into service out of desperate necessity. "They're hailing us, Captain," Rodriguez announced. Murphy took a deep breath. On screen, Admiral Kryken appeared on the view screen, his scaled features impassive. Behind him stood Commander Vexel and several other Zaharian officers. "Captain Murphy." Kryken greeted him formally. "The Empire welcomes you to Sanctuary Prime. We propose conducting our parley aboard a neutral station in stable orbit. Your security concerns will be respected. Equal numbers, equal armaments." Murphy nodded. "Agreed, Admiral. My team and I stand ready to transport." 30 minutes later, Murphy found himself seated across from Kryken in a sterile conference room aboard an automated research station. Hayes and Turner flanked him, while Vexel and another Zaharian officer accompanied Kryken. The atmosphere was tense but controlled, professional representatives of 2 civilizations with the potential to become either allies or mortal enemies. "Let us begin with facts," Kryken said, his translator rendering his harsh, Zaharian speech into smoothly accented English. "Your fleet has violated Imperial territory. Your vessels have engaged and disabled Zaharian military assets. These are acts of war by any definition." Murphy nodded, accepting the charges without argument. "We came prepared for war, Admiral, but not desiring it. As I explained earlier, humanity faces extinction. Earth's ecosystem has collapsed beyond recovery. Our colony worlds cannot support our population. We need new homes, and the Empire controls dozens of habitable worlds on its frontier that remain largely unsettled." "So you came to take them," Vexel interjected, his tone accusatory. "We came to survive," Murphy corrected. "Our preference would be peaceful coexistence, shared worlds, shared resources, shared knowledge. But yes, Commander, if denied that option, we came prepared to fight for our survival." Chrisen studied Murphy with an unreadable expression. "Show me Earth," he said suddenly. "Show me what has happened to your homeworld." Murphy glanced at Turner, who nodded and activated a small holographic projector. The image that formed above the conference table showed a planet shrouded in swirling, toxic clouds, its once blue oceans dark and turbid, its land masses scorched. Industrial practices, climate manipulation gone wrong, warfare. The specific causes matter less than the result. Murphy explained, his voice tightening despite his efforts at diplomacy. "The atmosphere became toxic 3 years ago. The last habitable zones are projected to fail within months. We've evacuated everyone we could. But..." He paused, fighting for composure. "Billions remained when the fleet departed. They couldn't be saved." Turner advanced the projection, showing images of the human fleet under construction, civilian vessels being retrofitted, mining platforms being converted to transport ships, cruise liners transformed into carriers for smaller craft. Operation Exodus began as a contingency plan. Murphy continued, "A last resort if all other solutions failed. When it became clear that Earth was beyond saving, we implemented it. Every ship capable of interstellar travel, every resource we could salvage, every human who could be evacuated." The final image showed the fleet departing Earth orbit, hundreds of mismatched vessels moving away from the dying planet in a ragged formation that would gradually become more organized as they mastered the art of fleet coordination. 237 ships, Murphy said softly, carrying approximately 3 million human beings. All that remains of a civilization that once numbered billions. Chrisen and Vexel exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then Chrisen leaned forward, his massive hands flat on the conference table. "I believe you, Captain Murphy," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "And I begin to understand the unconventional nature of your tactics. You fight not as soldiers, but as survivors." "We fight as we must," Murphy replied simply. Chrisen nodded slowly. "The Empire has faced many enemies in its long history. Captain, some sought conquest, some sought our destruction, some sought our resources, but never have we faced an enemy who sought simply to exist." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "Perhaps that makes you not an enemy at all." Hope, fragile but real, blossomed in Murphy's chest, but he kept his expression neutral. "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" "A compromise," Chrisen replied. "The Empire cannot and will not cede sovereignty over its territories, but it can accommodate refugees under certain conditions." Over the next several hours, the outlines of an agreement took shape. The human refugees would be granted settlement rights on 6 outer worlds, including portions of Sanctuary Prime. Each settlement would include Zaharian oversight councils with human delegates, ensuring both imperial sovereignty and human autonomy in day-to-day governance. In exchange, humanity would share its technological innovations, particularly the adaptability and resourcefulness demonstrated by the Exodus fleet, and recognize the ultimate authority of the Zaharian Empire in matters of interstellar politics and defense. It wasn't perfect. Hayes argued fiercely for greater autonomy, while Vexel pushed for more restrictive oversight. But as the negotiations progressed, a framework emerged that both sides could accept, not as an ideal solution, but as a viable one. "There is one additional matter," Chryson said as they approached the conclusion of the parley. "The escape pods that have already reached Imperial worlds." Murphy tensed. Those pods contained thousands of refugees, including many children and elderly who had been prioritized for the first wave of settlement. "What about them?" he asked cautiously. "They have already begun establishing rudimentary shelters and life support systems," Chryson said. "Rather than disrupt these efforts, I propose they become the foundation for the settlements we have discussed. Imperial Engineering Corps can assist in developing proper infrastructure." Murphy blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected concession. "That would be most appreciated, Admiral," as the final terms were codified and transmitted to both fleets. Murphy found himself standing with Chryson at a viewport, gazing down at the blue-green surface of Sanctuary Prime. "You took a significant risk, coming here as you did," Chryson observed. "If the Empire had chosen to respond with full military force, we would have fought," Murphy said simply, "and we would have lost. Eventually. But not before establishing enough settlements to ensure our survival as a species." He turned to face the Admiral. "We didn't come looking for war, Admiral, but we came prepared to pay any price for survival." Chryson nodded, something like respect showing in his alien features. A lesson the Empire would do well to remember. "Captain Murphy, comfortable empires grow complacent. Complacent empires eventually fall. Perhaps we can help prevent that," Murphy suggested. "Human adaptability paired with Zaharian stability. There are worse foundations for an alliance." "Indeed," Chryson agreed. "Though I suspect Commander Vexel and many others will require time to adjust to this new arrangement." Murphy smiled slightly. "Change is rarely comfortable, Admiral, but often necessary." As they rejoined their respective delegations to formalize the agreement, Murphy felt the weight of responsibility shifting on his shoulders, not disappearing, but transforming. No longer was he solely responsible for humanity's survival. Now he carried the additional burden of ensuring humanity's integration into a complex, alien political structure. But for the first time since Earth's collapse had accelerated beyond the point of no return, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. 3 months later, Murphy stood on a hillside overlooking what had once been empty plains on Sanctuary Prime. Now, a sprawling settlement stretched before him, a blend of human and Zaharian architecture, creating something entirely new. Prefabricated human habitation modules stood alongside elegant Zaharian structures. Hydroponic farms operated next to experimental fields, where Zaharian agricultural experts tested the compatibility of native plants with human dietary needs. "Impressive progress," Vexel commented, standing beside him. The Zaharian commander had been appointed as the Imperial liaison to the human settlements, a position that had initially seemed like a demotion, but was rapidly becoming one of the most influential roles in frontier politics. "Your engineering corps deserves much of the credit," Murphy replied. "We couldn't have established infrastructure this quickly without their assistance." Vexel made a dismissive gesture. "The Empire has been building colonies for millennia. It's your people's adaptability that continues to surprise us. These modifications to our standard atmospheric processors..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Our engineers would never have considered such unorthodox approaches." Murphy smiled slightly. Necessity breeds innovation. Commander, when you can't follow the rule book, you write a new one. They continued their inspection tour through the settlement, observing joint construction crews, humans and Zaharians, working side by side to build hospitals, schools, power grids. The initial wariness between the species hadn't entirely disappeared, but it was gradually being replaced by cautious cooperation. Admiral Kryken sends his regards, Vexel mentioned as they approached a newly completed community center. He has been briefing the High Command on the unexpected benefits of human integration into frontier territories. Unexpected benefits? Murphy repeated, raising an eyebrow. Vexel's expression shifted in what Murphy had come to recognize as the Zaharian equivalent of a wry smile. Your people's approach to resource utilization is highly inefficient by Imperial standards, but remarkably effective in frontier conditions where standardized solutions are suboptimal. Several of our colony worlds have begun implementing human-inspired adaptations to their infrastructure. It was a significant admission from a civilization that prided itself on 10,000 years of refined, standardized practices. Change is rarely comfortable. Murphy echoed his earlier words to Krysen. But often necessary. Vexel inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the point. Indeed. Which brings me to the purpose of my visit. The High Command has approved the establishment of a formal diplomatic mission between the Empire and human settlements. Admiral Kryken suggested you might be the appropriate representative for humanity. Murphy stopped walking, surprised by the offer. Me? I'm a ship captain, not a diplomat. You are the leader who brought your people safely to our worlds, Vexel pointed out. The one who negotiated terms that preserved both human survival and Imperial sovereignty. Who better? Before Murphy could respond, they were interrupted by the approach of a small group, human children, accompanied by a young Zaharian cadet who appeared to be serving as some kind of guide or instructor. Ambassador Murphy, one of the children called, using the title that had been informally applied to him in recent weeks. Come see what we're doing. Curious. Murphy and Vexel followed the excited children to a newly prepared park at the center of the settlement. There, under the supervision of the Zaharian cadet, the children were engaged in planting saplings, earth trees that had been carefully cultivated from seeds brought on the Exodus. This is going to be a real earth park, one of the children explained proudly, with trees and grass and everything. The Zaharian cadet straightened, offering a formal salute to Vexel. The Botanical Division approved the project. Commander, these species are compatible with Sanctuary Prime's ecosystem and pose no invasive risk. Vexel nodded, his usual stern demeanor softening slightly. Carry on, cadet. Murphy knelt beside one of the children, a young girl carefully patting soil around the base of a sapling. What kind of tree is this? He asked. An oak, she replied, her expression serious. Teacher says they can live for hundreds of years. This one might still be here when I'm old. The simple statement caught Murphy off guard, striking him with its profound implication. These children were planning futures, long futures, on this new world, not as temporary refugees, but as permanent residents, as home. He rose, unexpectedly moved by the realization. Beside him, Vexel was watching the scene with an uncharacteristically thoughtful expression. Your proposal, Murphy said quietly to the Zaharian commander. I accept. Vexel turned to him, questioning. If your people truly want diplomatic relations with humanity, I'll serve as ambassador. Murphy clarified. Not because I'm qualified, but because I understand what's at stake. For all of us. Vexel nodded, a gesture of respect between equals, rather than the formal acknowledgement of a superior to a subordinate. I believe Admiral Krysen will be pleased with your decision. As they continued to watch the children and the young Zaharian cadet working together to plant the saplings. Murphy reflected on the journey that had brought humanity to this moment, from the desperate evacuation of a dying Earth to the makeshift fleet that had terrified a galactic empire. From the brink of extinction to the beginning of a new chapter, the human armada had come seeking survival, prepared for war but hoping for peace. They had found not just survival, but the potential for something more, a future in which humanity could rebuild, not in isolation, but as part of something larger than themselves. In the center of the park, a human child and the Zaharian cadet knelt side by side, carefully planting what looked like an oak sapling. Their expressions were identical, solemn, focused, hopeful. Different species, different worlds of origin, but united in the simple, profound act of creating something that would outlive them both. It wasn't the end humanity had feared, nor the conquest the Zaharians had dreaded. It was something neither had fully imagined, a beginning